Well, now you can clap. Hello, good morning. Woo! Good morning, Brussels. So, welcome. It's lovely to see everyone. We are so excited to be back. As always, we want to take a look back and then a look forward. But before we do, whose first time of EmberFest is this? Look at that. Woo! Welcome. Welcome. So this has been going on for quite some time. We took over in 2017. Last year we were in Dublin. As you can see, COVID took a little bit of threw a bit of a curveball into all of it, but we're super excited to be in Belgium. And as I said, we always like to share the numbers with you. So while 24 and 23 were pretty much the same, this year came in a little under in terms of Gabor. We talked about this. How you feeling? A bit sad though. Come on, this is a bit down, right? We said we don't know, but there is of course something missing still. We have a lot of people joining us remotely. Like this is actually coming back up. So Alex actually worked on setting up the remote environment, and with EmberConf unfortunately not happening this year, we have a ton of people from the US especially joining us. So we're very happy for every single person tuning in remotely. As always, Eva made me start this tradition back in Paris. A few words about the venue. We're super happy to be here. It's the Royal Flemish Theatre. This used to be a warehouse over 250 years ago, I believe. And then it became an arsenal. And roughly 200 years ago, I believe, the king, for the first time, spoke Dutch publicly at the opening of this theater, which became a huge deal because he kind of made that the official language, or at least recognized it as such. So we'll be here for 2 days. This is what it used to look like on the right. That's the arsenal. We'll also have the party here. For everyone who took the elevator, you missed this. This is on the second floor. Tomorrow, we'll briefly mention that. We'll hang out just downstairs. And again, the team has been wonderful. We'll thank them again in a little bit. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Balint, who's going to walk you through the next couple of days. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think now it's kind of become the standard way of doing things here at EmberFest. We usually have 3 times 3 presentations a day. And now, for the first time in history of EmberFest, we'll have a workshop at the end, which is going to take longer. So we have 3-3-2 the first day, and then we are back to the 3-3-3 the second day. Actually, we had some work. I realized we had a workshop at the very, very first EmberFest in Munich, probably, 11 years ago. I don't even know, 12. That was a separate day, I think. So and now it's built into the program. And we have as you could see, we have a lightning talk slot right here. So that's not today, but right here. We have lightning talks at 4 o'clock. So if you have something you want to talk about during a lightning talk, then please send an email to mail@emberfest.eu or put the lightning talk subject directly on the whiteboard, or find any of us if you want to discuss it, or just let us know. Thank you very much.
So while the closing party is tomorrow, there's going to be a happy hour today as well. So this is, to make clear, this is just a recommendation for us. It's not included in your tickets. We're not paying for that, but still, this is a nice place that we can all go, right? And it is, I think, it's like a convenient 10-minute walk away. Let's just all go there and have some drinks. And as Joshua said, conference closing party is in this nice space downstairs on the second floor, I think, tomorrow after the last talk, essentially. Code of conduct. So obviously we want to this to be like a nice experience for everybody. Please be nice to each other. If anyone is not sort of behaving correctly, also please let us know. You can find contact information on the website. Obviously, you can reach us directly. Hopefully, nothing happens as I think usual in the past. Again, we're the organizers, Joschka, Barland. I represent Main Matter. There's a bunch of other people on the team that have done a lot of work to do this, and this might be the final slide. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. Sponsors. So obviously we couldn't be doing this without sponsors, right? So thanks to these awesome companies for supporting us. We have some new sponsors, I think, and a bunch of sponsors that have supported us for many, many years, sort of allowing us to do this for 10, 12 years, I don't know, but for a very long time. Yeah, that's it. So enjoy the conference.
Okay, hello. Good morning, EmberFest. It's 1 a.m. here, so it's evening in my neck of the woods, but I'm excited to be here to talk about something that's been on all of our minds. Yeah, so I've given a bunch of keynotes at these conferences over the years, and obviously I'm going to talk about Ember today, but I also want to talk about AI. And I think something I want to riff on for just a second is I know there's a lot of people in the ecosystem who are excited about AI. I also know there's a bunch of people in the ecosystem who look at AI and they see it as like the next iteration of like VR or Bitcoin or whatever. My personal feeling about it is that my 8-year-old son, by the way, Jonas is 8 now. He was on stage as a baby at EmberConf 8 years ago. So my 8-year-old son goes to a school that has to worry about whether people are cheating with AI. AI is basically everywhere. I don't think it's going anywhere. And I think I think of it a little bit more like the .com bubble, where sure, there was a bubble, it was a real thing. People spent a lot of money on pets.com or whatever. But at the end of the day, it was a pretty huge change in the way that society worked, how we organized, how we wrote software, how much software mattered. And I just don't think AI is going anywhere. And I think if you interrogate your own life, your own use of it, I think you'll realize that. So I think it makes sense for us to be thinking about, no matter how we might feel, it's legitimate to be worried about things. But no matter how we feel, we should be thinking about the fact that there's a huge change underfoot and what it means for us. So that's what I want to talk about today. I'll get into it in a little bit, but my job day to day these days is to be the architect for AI experiences at Heroku. So I'm also thinking about this a lot. So I've been at Heroku for a couple of years. I worked at Tilda for almost a decade before that. And I think I realized when I was writing this talk that people might not totally know what I'm up to. And I also know, like from watching everybody else disappear into big companies, that it's just a little bit hard to tell from the outside exactly how much somebody is still involved or what they're doing. So I wanted to just start by giving a little bit of a sense of what I've been doing. And I think basically there's 4 things. You just indulge me for a minute. This is just my own personal thing, but I want to make sure that people have a sense of where I'm coming from. So first of all, the biggest thing that I've been doing is I've been maintaining apps at Heroku. So Heroku Dash, by the way, all of Heroku's front-end apps more or less are Ember apps or becoming Ember apps, and that's part of what my job is there. But the biggest one, the dashboard, is an Ember app, and it's an app that's been around for 10 years. So a lot of that is just a matter of keeping things going, keeping features being shipped at the same time as iterating towards Polaris. And this is just something I did, I think today or this morning, is like resolving outdated dependencies. So this is like a pretty normal thing that people do all the time, and just a kind of thing that I also do working on it. And I think the takeaway that I have there is it is still true that really old apps, regardless of the history of them, can still iterate towards Polaris, but there's a lot of work that we have to do to make that smoother. Another thing I've been doing is just taking some of the smaller apps that are not dashboard and just doing wholesale refactors. This is something I did earlier this year, is migrate the status UI all from I think it was 328, Ember 328, all the way up to 5.12, and Soon it'll be on 6x, right? So that's another thing. I've also been building brand new apps in Polaris, and unfortunately, I can't talk much about that right now. The only hint I will give you is that something to do with AI, and also you'll learn about it soon enough. But the point there is that when we build new apps at Heroku now that are front ends, they are built on the most modern Ember. Right now that means we're using Vite, we're using GJS, GTS, all that stuff, and that also is pretty exciting for me. And I think what I would say about that whole spectrum is that I totally feel the pain of older apps. When I joined Heroku a couple years ago, they were stuck on 328, and now we're like pushing towards being on 5x, probably done in the next few weeks. I totally see the pain of like, there's older apps and you don't get to use the new stuff, but I'm also like really in touch with the excitement of being able to use the new stuff. And there are like people who are on our team who used to use React are really, really excited and like happy about the Polaris stuff. So I feel the urgency of getting the older apps onto the newer versions of Ember. But I'm also like really excited about the way that the new versions of Ember feel, like how they work. Like I said, I'm also responsible for the architecture of Heroku's AI experiences. There's a lot of things that means. The way I like to think about it is the Heroku AI experiences team is the AI team plus the front end team. And the way I think about that is that AI is just another experience in a lot of ways. Like if you're interacting with your cursor or Claude Code or some kind of AI tool like Bolt.new or something like that, those are all experiences. And the only way to think about what those AI features are is in terms of the front end experience. And I think in a lot of ways, the discourse is a little divorced from that in the first place. So I actually think it's cool that the AI team and the front end team are part of the same team. They're at Heroku. And I think it's a nice perspective on how to think about how things fit together. Okay. So today, what I'm going to talk about is the relationship between Ember's past, present, and future, and the AI era that we're entering. But I want to start by just going back in time. So, first I'll say where I am today is I'm a parent of two amazing kids, a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And both of those people are people who use software and use AI, but they're also people that are becoming newly empowered by AI. So Jonas, my 8-year-old, since he got Claude Code, I gave him Claude rather, with supervision, of course. And he started building his own apps on there because Claude lets you do that. And I started to notice Leia, also, who many people know here, has been using Claude Code to build task management applications for herself. And like she vibe coded an MCP server and a widget for her Mac. So part of my experience being a parent, member of the family, is just seeing how empowering the new AI era has been. I'm also the architect of AI experience at Heroku. And really what I want to say with this slide is I don't think much has changed for me about like what I believe in at a fundamental level. I'm still shipping Ember apps in production, but at a basic level, I'm a believer in empowering developers through software. And I'll say a little bit later, like where we didn't go, where we have some work to do. But I think Ember is still awesome because Ember believes in that. Now I'm going to unpack a lot what I mean by that. That's what most of this talk is about. Okay, so now to rewind, like how did I get here in the first place? How am I here right now? How am I working at Heroku? Like I didn't start out as a developer actually. So the first programming experience I ever had was on an old PC running QBasic. And I don't know, like I feel like at this point I'm definitely getting old, but my first programming was in DOS 5.5 because QBasic came with DOS 5.5 along with a couple of games you could play, including the original Snake game, which is called Nibbles. And the coolest thing about it was that you played the game by opening up the source code and hitting F5 to run it. So like you walked into the source code, you hit F5. And when I got frustrated by how often I was running out of lives, I decided to poke around in the source code and see if I could change it. And I found a variable that controlled the number of lives. I changed it to 99, hit F5, and suddenly I had 99 lives. And this small act of tinkering with a piece of running code and seeing immediate results, like really was incredibly empowering for me. I was probably like Jonas's age when that happened. I was 8. And I made a bunch of games for my siblings in QBasic and like everything was going well until a relative got so excited about that I was interested in programming that he gave me the KNRC book, and I tried to learn it. And when I couldn't get it, I was like, I guess programming is not really for me. And I really didn't touch code again until high school. So that basically shows like it was a hugely empowering moment, but it wasn't on its own enough. It was very easy for me to convince myself that that empowerment was a mirage. Um, the next programming experience I had was in high school. I was and still am a pretty big Star Trek fan. And at the time, I found an elaborate Stardate like spec online that showed how to convert any date into a star date across all the major eras. And I was like super nerd, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to make a star date calculator in VB6. And I had a lot of fun. It was really awesome. And I kind of had the same feeling as I had with QBasic, where like I didn't have to know a lot of things. I just got to do some stuff, and then it was working, and then I got to tinker with it. I read a little bit more of the spec. I made some more changes. Like, now I have the original series. And the really the key thing was that I was able to get something working, and then I tinkered a little bit, and I got to see what happened, and I could make some changes to the UI, and then I could see what was happening in the code. And that was really awesome, and I like shared it with my Star Trek friends. But then once again, a well-meaning friend got excited and was like, "You should learn the Win32 API if you want to be like a really serious programmer." And again, I like tried to learn the Win32 API. This is like in the mid to late '90s, so I like the internet existed, but there was not like a good way to read the docs. I couldn't afford the Petzold book, if people know what that is. And again, I'm just like, I guess that's a mirage. I guess the empowering feeling I got from Visual Basic 6 and QBasic, it's like that's like the toy version of programming, but the real version of programming is like really out of reach. It's not for me. And then, like, believe it or not, the next programming experience I had was Microsoft Front Page. And at the time, I was a print designer for my college newspaper. I even picked up a handful of awards for college newspapering. And at the time, I would describe myself as like a computer whiz, like the stereotype from '90s movies. But I wouldn't describe myself as a programmer at all. But what I did know was like Microsoft Word and like the kind of I knew how to like do stuff with computers. And Microsoft Front Page was basically like Word. So the thing is, you could like go and you can make websites. Fine. This is like I found a YouTube video where someone's showing it to you from like 15 years ago. But the thing is, Front Page had a code tab, and it wasn't like Dreamweaver. The code was actually readable. This is also from that guy's YouTube video. Now you probably look at this and you're like, oh, that like there's all kinds of things you don't like about it. But if you looked at Dreamweaver at the time, it looked like assembler output. There was no chance of editing it. And the thing about Front Page is that I could make a little change in the WYSIWYG editor. I could go into the code, see what happened, make a little change in the code, go back to the WYSIWYG editor. And that back and forth, that like tinkering vibe basically taught me a lot about HTML and even to some extent CSS in a way that like Dreamweaver never did. And again, like the thing that was useful about this, and the thing that was useful about all the things that I did up until this point that I had some success with, is that I was able to get something working pretty quickly, something that already solved the problem for me. Like I was using this to make a real website, for better or worse. But then I was able to leverage that into a tinkering back and forth that got me to understand. The thing is, though, that up until this point, every one of these tools had that vibe, but the world around me was telling me that it wasn't real, it was fake. Okay. Now, here's the thing that happened. I eventually got a job after that as a web designer. And like both me and my boss thought that web designer and print designer were the same thing, which they aren't. But I very quickly had to learn programming. And at this point, I was forced to do some actual programming work, and I ran into both jQuery and Rails at the time. And the thing about jQuery and Rails is that they had a lot of the same vibe. Like I was able to get something working very quickly. I was at the time I'd been struggling with PHP and MySQL, and I could barely get anything working. It was a huge struggle. And then I switched to jQuery and Rails, and suddenly I was like making a CMS for my company in like a week or two, and I was able to do it on the job, and like people looked at it and they thought that it was a real thing. And now I wasn't able to tell myself that it was fake, because now I had like a real job paying me real money, and I was able to get to a point where I understood code. But I was still at a point where, and I remember this vividly, where I remember using Rails and thinking like I need to get the IP address. I remember there's some like page on the website, and I would like try to bookmark it or whatever. And in retrospect, it's literally just the page that describes the request class on the Rails site. but I didn't know what a class was or what a request was or anything. So for me, I was using Rails a lot, like how somebody would use PHP, where like, I don't know how this works, but I can like learn the incantations. And you might think, and I think a lot of people think, okay, well, that the result of that is surely going to be you get nowhere. It's nonsense. But the thing is that because those tools, those empowering tools, started out with something that worked, that made me successful at work, and then gave me a lot of headroom to keep working, to keep tinkering. That really helped me succeed. And I think for people who don't remember the blog in 15 minutes demo, I think what was most powerful about it was not just that it was like, look here, I've done a scaffold, it's very good. I think what was good about the blog in 15 minutes demo was that it showed you DHH making little changes and then seeing the change that happened in real life. And then you could make those same changes, but you could make other ones, right? And so this tool that was like, in retrospect, a lot like what people think of as vibe coding. You like generate a scaffold, and what is that? It's basically nothing. It's garbage code, right? But that starting point was a starting point that you could then use and start playing around with and seeing what happened. And that is fundamentally an empowering tool. So I want to define what I mean by empowerment, because I talk about it a lot. What I mean when I talk about empowerment is that a tool is empowering when it lets someone build and share software that they couldn't build and share before. And I think the reason I want to define it this way is because I think there are a lot of tools, and a lot of people think that they're building tools to make things easier for people, or to make things more efficient or more productive for people who already know how to do something. And those are the people that are going to probably understand what you're building at the beginning when you're building something. And they're going to be the ones that have a lot of opinions about why it's not necessarily the right tool, right? They're going to say, oh, well, it doesn't have this or that or the other thing. Rails definitely was like that. They'll say it's a toy, etc. And I always, the reason I want to define empowerment this way is that the people who couldn't do the thing before and who could do it now don't have any of those opinions. The people who couldn't do the thing before and could do it now are actually real software developers now. They're really building something. And I think it is, those people don't have a seat at the table because they are not already software developers. They don't know how to participate in the conversation. And it really is up to us, and I'll get into this a bit more. It really is up to us to look out for those people and to think about what the world could be like if more people were able to be software developers, because those people have no way of saying that themselves. And the people who are already there, who are already software developers and who think of what you're doing, they think of Rust as a better C++. Those C++ developers don't take seriously the people that, the Ruby or Node programmers who became Rust programmers, right? So I think it's just important to think about empowering software as taking people who couldn't do something and who could do it now, because that changes the way that we think about how we design things. Okay, so here's another thing. So I started programming in 2005, and I think there's something about that era, what I'll call the empowerment era, that both hasn't continued. And I think if people were around at the time, I want to like talk through how it felt. So this is basically the era of things like Rails, jQuery, and WordPress. And it really did take a huge group of people who couldn't write software before, I'm one of them, and made it possible for people to not only create software. There was a lot of jokes about like Rails generate Twitter or whatever. It did some of that, but there was also a ton of people who literally used that to bootstrap themselves and become software engineers. And here's the thing, like the thing about the tools that were around from that era is that they were used collectively by beginners and experts, and like in the same terms. And everybody at the time was focused on building amazing products. They weren't focused on like, what is functional programming the right thing or whatever. People weren't focused on these like very pedantic details. Like, do you know how to use the spread operator, etc. There was a huge amount of emphasis, and it's just missing today, around the craft of software, like the process of developing our skills, not so that we could like feel like we're good at solving programming puzzles. It's not like I didn't write this slide, but maybe like this is like the leak code era, where like almost everything you're doing has nothing to do with building software to make good features for customers, or like make software that could be evolved smoothly over time, etc. Now it's very much like, do you know the tricks? And people's sense of themselves is very bound up in whether they know the tricks, whether they understand the right lingo. And that is like fundamentally a disempowering. That fundamentally means that if you don't already know the lingo, you're not in the club. Whereas the empowerment era was a lot more about how can we all how can the experts help the beginners learn enough about how to build software so that we're all building awesome things for people. And for better or worse, like the feeling that you get from like even the VC era, and I don't like VC very much, but the VC era at the time was very focused on like, for better or worse, building really cool things for people. Some of it was silly, right? But there was a lot of like making software do things for people. Now, like so much of the bubbles that occur are like just about technology, right? There's not even really always, especially in AI, there's not always a theory about what even the point is. It's like so many levels of meta. So I think what's really interesting about communities in this era is just like how much everyone was focused on honing their craft. Again, if you were around, you were around. I think we used to joke a lot that like every conference had like 10 talks about testing. And I really, like, as much as that was a joke at the time, I really miss like people wanting to talk about testing because people were trying, like people across the spectrum were like trying to collectively get better at the process of maintaining software and making it good for our customers. And again, I think it's hard to see without taking a step back because it still feels like people talk about building quality software and customer experiences. But I think something has really changed. I think in the empowerment era, there was a strong sense of alignment between what was good for our users and what was good for developers. So the feeling went, if we're empowering developers to build stuff, those developers have their own perspective. They're like the person who's going to come up with the dog, like the pet shop app or whatever like silly app people talk about. That person knows something about that. And like we want to empower them to build software because they're going to build something awesome. And like we should help them become a better developer. We should all work together to make our software better. By the way, I'm sure like there's a certain amount of rose-colored glasses and like etc. You can at me or don't at me, whatever. I'm not saying that everything is rose-colored, etc. What I am saying is that there was definitely a period where like Rails happened, jQuery happened, Heroku happened, etc. Where like most of what the focus was if we help people become developers who weren't developers before, if we help open up the democratize, open it up, that will be good for users. And I think there was a change probably around 2015, if I'm putting a finger on it, where suddenly you started hearing people talk about how developer ergonomics is actually bad. It's bad for customers. Like the more we empower people, the worse it is for customers. And I'm gonna do a little troll here because I really dislike this part of the JavaScript ecosystem, but I think it really is pretty common as an attitude. So this is like from 2021. It's like the issue isn't that DX is bad. DX is good. The problem is that folks prioritize DX over UX, and like this is not a sentiment that really existed in 2007, 2008. That like you could be prioritizing DX over UX. That is a thing that came from, and I'll get into what I think is going on here. That's a thing that came from a later era that is more about like being a programmer as a programmer than being than the empowerment story. And like this, I said this in 2021, and I still believe it, which is like these are not things that are actually in conflict with each other. I think it just doesn't work out. Like it doesn't work out that if you ask people to choose, if we make everyone have a worse experience, that results in better experiences for our users. And I think if you keep reading the thread, of course, everyone agrees you could try to balance those things like the UX and DX. But I think it is still a change from the earlier era where the vibe was that we're all building great experiences for our users, regardless of our level of skill, and that the developer ecosystems were about moving the ball forward for everybody. Like that, something has changed after that. And by the way, Ember's from like towards the end of that earlier era. Unfortunate timing, but Ember definitely started during an empowerment era and like found itself in a disempowering era a little bit later. So I as I'm getting towards the end here, I want to introduce like something that is like my way of understanding how all this works. So there's a person named Terry Tao. If you don't know him, he's cool for other reasons, but he wrote a really awesome essay called "There's More to Mathematics Than Rigor and Proof," and I'll go into it in a minute. But it's really not about math actually, but because he is like a Fields Award winner, etc. Like you could take him seriously, and he knows what he's talking about something that is like fundamentally very much about rigor. And so what he says is that there's 3 stages of being a mathematician. There's the pre-rigorous stage where like you're just operating by intuition. You don't really know what you're doing, but you you understand what you're thinking. Then there's a rigor stage, which is like it became super formal. You're getting precise, etc. And then post rigor. And let me say what that means. So the first stage, and I'm just like I use the terms TT1, TT2, TT3 to describe these. So the first stage is the pre-rigorous stage, and basically this is just what he says. Like he says it's where mathematics is taught in an informal, intuitive manner based on examples, fuzzy notions, and hand waving. And he gives some examples about calculus. And this is like probably what most people in the room have experienced as math, like even if you did calculus or whatever. And from a programming perspective, it's like I'm getting things done. I understand that I want to put something on the screen, and I like figure out how to do something with that, and I can't wait to learn how to do more of that. That's like how it feels. Then there's a second stage, which he says, okay, in math, that's basically like it's like the proper stage. It's like you gotta learn all the notation and everything. And now the emphasis is on theory. It's on how do you manipulate the abstract concept. It's basically don't worry so much about what it means, just focus on symbols and concepts and abstractions. And this is the point where in programming, someone says like, oh my God, I feel like so burned by all these abstractions that I was using. I can't believe how naive I was. And like the way we're going to get quality in software is making everybody learn like preemptively learn all the things that I already learned just now. But then there's like the third stage, which is the back to reality stage. And what Terry says is, this is the stage where someone has grown comfortable with all the rigorous foundations of the chosen field, and they're now ready to revisit and refine one's pre-rigorous intuition on the subject, but this time with the intuition solidly buttressed by rigorous theory. And that is the point in software where someone's like, I understand all the things that I just got through the rigorous stage, and now I can go back to like just thinking about like making good software again. And I think probably a lot of people in this room have that experience where like you're like pretty much done thinking about all the fiddly bits, and you like realize, oh my God, I just spent like a lot of years not really focusing on building the kind of software that I think would make my users happy. I've just spent a lot of time thinking about, someone called it in the Haskell community, type Tetris. Like I spent a lot of time juggling code, but not actually thinking about building software. And like, so now you got to the point where you can go back to trusting your intuitions. Now, and he says the point of rigor is not to destroy all intuition, it should be to destroy bad intuition while clarifying and elevating good intuition. And so here's like circling back around, the empowerment era, in my opinion, is basically taking this idea that there are people at the beginning, there are intuitions that you're operating with, but some of them aren't right, but they're still intuitive. And at the end, you're working with intuitions, but you're better at them. And the empowerment era was about taking the people on both sides of that spectrum and getting them to work together around the same intuitions, right? So it's not about saying there's like beginner software and there's advanced software, and the beginner software is like what DHH would call the easy bake oven mode. It's saying by the time you get to be a super advanced developer, you're actually thinking in the same way as a beginner developer. So we can build software that makes the beginner developer effective because the expert developer also wants to be thinking that way as well, right? And I've said this a lot over the years, but it's not just about like, are you a beginner or are you an expert? Like everybody has moments where we're left tired, we're distracted, we're overwhelmed, or like just would rather be focusing on building software that is delighting our users than like the fiddly bits. Like, so when I say tired me, what I mean is when I'm like very wired, I'm on, like what I try to do is I try to build software that makes the tired version of myself more effective at writing the kind of software that I want to be writing. And so I don't think it's really about beginners and experts. It's about when you're thinking abstractly and when you're thinking non-abstractly. And the goal is not to make everyone think about the rigorous details all the time. The goal is that when you're thinking about the rigorous details, you want to distill them down to something that you yourself would be happy to use when you're not in that headspace. Again, you could be tired, or it could just be like, I don't want to be thinking about that right now. So in my opinion, our job as software people is to clarify and elevate good intuition. It is not to force people to think about the rigorous thing all the time. And when we do this right, we end up with tools that feel like our intuitions, but they capture the best craft and expertise of the entire community. And like to me, that is what empowerment is. It's not about making an easy mode for people who are beginners so that they can learn how to be good software developers. It's about taking the things that we know as experts, as advanced people, and that we don't want to be thinking about ourselves all the time, and turning that into something that looks like an intuition. It feels like an intuition. That's what good empowerment software is about. So I just spent a bunch of time talking about empowerment. I said I would talk about AI. I promised to talk about AI. So before I get into the connection, I just want to give you a few heterodox views because I promised those too. And the three that I'll say here, and they're a little bit connected, but I just want to get these out there, is first of all, AI tools that promise that you're going to like run them overnight and like go, you'll run 55 Claude codes in the background doing. I think that's like selling the wrong dream for reasons that I could talk about in a different talk. But I think that people should try to collaborate with their AI tools, use them as an augmentation of thought, a way to improve your thought. And I think my personal heuristic here is that when I'm using an AI tool, right, I'm thinking harder, not less hard, because the AI is taking away a lot of the drudge work and it's leaving all the hard thinking for me to do. So I'm spending like more percentage of each hour thinking hard than I was before AI. I think that's definitely the opposite of how people imagine AI will work, but I don't see another way around that. Second of all, I think people think like, well, React is overrepresented in the training data and everybody's building stuff with React. So that means that React automatically already won the AI era. Definitely do not think that that's true. And I'll say more in like as I'm closing here. And then the last bit is, I think this is a little less heterodox, but I don't know. I don't hear a lot of people saying it. I think if you build good documentation, good tools for humans, they tend to be better for AIs. And I think there's some things you want to do to, like some things you might have gotten away with. You might have gotten away with like, oh, we'll just train people or whatever that you can't get away with AI. But I think almost all of the things that are like the best ways to make AIs effective with software are about doing things that we probably should have been doing all along. So those are my three views. So why? So let me close the loop. So basically, I just talked a lot about the fact that we have beginner developers and advanced developers, hired me, wired me, etc., that are all writing software together based on the same shared intuitions, and that's the kind of software we like. And that there's another kind of software, which rhymes with Shmiak, that has the perspective that what you should do is you should like learn the low level and you should be thinking about it all the time. And here's how AIs work. AIs, by definition, take a thing that a human asks for, like at a high level, at an intuitive level. They say, I want you to make a website that does blah, blah, blah. And they turn that into code. And so TT2 tools, the rigorous tools that ask you to think about all the details, those are tools that think that the right way to write software is for you and your own brain to take the intuitive thing and distill it down into the implementation details. And it's not just like because we can't do better. It's like because the idea is morally that is necessary because there is not a good way to take that intuition and turn it into the right code. So it's like the only way to get that behavior that you want is to make you think about all the details that connect your intuition to the implementation details. And the problem is those tools are a disaster for AI because AIs now have to pick between a million different Stack Overflow responses or blog posts or whatever. And by definition, the argument is you can't really know without getting really into the weeds on it, like what the right answer is. But they're just picking statistically from all the things that the world already did, right? So those two things cannot gel, right? Either you just like, you have to be very rigorous, you have to think all the time and you need humans to do it, or there's like some way that you could map intuition onto something lower, some implementation details, and you don't need to be thinking about it all the time. And then you actually want abstractions that do that for you. So that was a little muddy, but I think the point is, the argument was muddy, but I think the point is, if you can write tools that map the human intuition onto the implementation details and capture the expertise inside of there, then the AI is just going to be pretty good at that because the AI now just has to like do the simple mapping onto the tool. It doesn't have to like pick from a million different nuance and subtle options about what implementation details to use. When developers graduate from pure intuition to the rigorous stage, what's happening is that they feel betrayed by the gaps between their intuition and their new reverse understanding. And I think the strongest way of seeing that is the law of leaky abstractions. And so Joel wrote this thing where he said, famous post, this is what I call leaky abstraction, TCP, blah, blah, blah. And the thing that I find mind-boggling about this essay is that he used TCP as like his main example, okay? And the thing is that TCP is one of the most successful abstractions in computing history. Billions of developers use it every day, powers the entire internet, works reliably for decades. And sure, like sometimes there's a packet loss, but even when that happens, you're still thinking in terms of connections and not packets, right? The key is the abstraction preserves your domain thinking even when the implementation details show through. And TCP is like a really successful, mostly that does not leak. So the idea that that is a good piece of evidence for like, actually abstractions are not, the essay is basically saying abstractions are not doing such good work for us. And it is like the progenitor of the entire idea of like people should just think rigorously all the time. It's a little mind-boggling. It's like SQL, it's TCP, it's things that in reality are actually good at capturing the domain and mapping intuition onto something. But I think it resonates. It resonates with people in the rigorous stage. So the thing is, I want to coin something here, which is like a leaky abstraction is you get very obsessed with. Sometimes you need to know about TCP packets. You feel betrayed by not realizing it. And sure, the implementation occasionally shows through, but the domain model stays intact. I think there's another problem which people don't talk about, which is an intuition leak, which is suddenly I'm not able to think about my shopping cart anymore. And now I'm deciding between like 15 different abstractions because of like some subtle functional programming details or whatever. And that, to my mind, is a much worse problem than a leaky abstraction, right? It's worth coming up with abstractions that help us map our intuition onto reality that mostly work. And it's really bad when there's a leak in our intuition, when the implementation leaks back into our intuition. And I think we have a lot of good evidence, ironically, from that very blog post that show us that we don't need to be so panicked about needing to think about the details of everything all the time. And so the thing about these like TT2 abstractions is it's not like you occasionally see the implementation. You're literally living in the implementation, and that prevents you from thinking about things like I'm making a shopping cart. By the way, I'm not saying that like no person in the world is like good at this. I'm saying that the ecosystem as a whole used to be much better about like, let's just think about what it means to make a thing like Twitter. And yeah, did the first version of Twitter like have a lot of problems? Sure. But it worked. And I think, the intuitions got people where they needed to be. And today it's mostly like, lol, like, why would you teach someone to do that when you need to learn these 55 things first before you can get started? And that doesn't get people going, right? So intuition leaks are basically a disaster for AI. And what I mean by that is, if the mapping from the intuition onto the implementation details is this like super noisy thing, what that means is that the AI is just guessing all the time. And then every time you change something, it like doesn't know which piece of the implementation is supposed to change and which piece is supposed to be stable. Everyone I'm sure in this room has experienced this where you ask to make a change. And the thing about the like empowering software is that empowering software captures enough of the intuition that the changes from one intuitive thing to another intuitive thing get the right behavior. You want to do things like have color palettes, not like hex colors as an example. But we're basically saying like, well, because this empowering software was winning in 2024, now we should just that means that those software wins forever, and now we should just get AIs to spew out thousands of lines of implementation details. And I just don't think that that's right. I think that's wrong. So what do we need? Like, remember that empowerment is about having beginners and experts share a common language and intuition. The experts help elevate the good intuition, and that lets everyone focus on building great experiences for our users. I think it is fair to say that the last 10 years have not been kind to this perspective. And like even worse than that, those of us who have been a believer in this kind of software have basically got trapped in encoding expertise from 2015 or 2010 and having it live long past its shelf date. So that means that I'm making a strong argument for why you need empowering software, but the reality is that abstractions like Ember that have existed for a long time have been lagging to the extent that we haven't been able to make the claim really about this story. We haven't been able to make the empowerment story. But that said, that doesn't mean that we should be stuck forever, because that's just where the musical chairs stopped when AI came out. We should be stuck forever with the kind of software that we've been dealing with for the past decade. I think we should go back to how we felt about empowerment in 2005 and the decade after that, and we should think about what that means now. And I think the really good news is, when you avoid intuition leaks, it helps AI. So there's an opportunity now. Now I'll get to Polaris. There's an opportunity now for us to say, like, what would it look like if we could build something that didn't have all the problems of the last, that it didn't encode all the, sorry, let me rewind. What would it look like if we could build a version of Ember that actually did the empowerment story that I said, but somehow like got past a lot of the stuff that has been making us feel like it's not an empowerment story? And I think one way to think about that is like React, GraphQL, etc., like Go, those things actually feel very empowering for people, because when they came out, they were already responding to software that claimed to be empowering, like Ember, but was actually kind of stuck in the past, right? So there's tools that felt empowering because they actually got cut through a bunch of crap that we were stuck with, and it's taken us a very long time to get past. But at the end of the day, that software still is asking you to think about implementation details all the time, and there's only so far those things can go before it comes crashing down. So here's what I think. Here's what I think the story is here. I think that we did most of the work that we need to do, and I'm sure many people will talk about this for the rest of the day or next couple of days. Most of the work that we need to do to get past that has happened, right? I think Octane did a lot of work to just make normal JavaScript functions work. GJS, GTS, Embroider, supporting V. There's like a ton of things that really cut through a lot of what was making Ember not feel like it plausibly could be an empowering story. That happened. It's largely in the past, or is nearly finished now. I think the thing that is most risky for us right now, like this is my opinion, I think the thing that's most risky for us right now is that it's very easy for us to look at things like the router map still has a function keyword in it with the this in it, and think that that's like really a problem. And historically it has been, because historically we've had to convince a bunch of people to like look at it and like not reject it in the taste test period. But I think the AI era means something different. In the AI era, I think whether or not the tool is whether or not the thing you're using is a successful tool is going to matter a lot more than like whether someone looks at the thing and they don't like the keyword. And so I think what we need to focus on right now is we need to focus on getting to a single coherent story for Ember that I'm not saying we don't need to worry about migration. We do need to worry about migration for all the reasons I said at the beginning of the talk. But I think we need to make sure that we need to focus more on there being a single coherent story that if you that maps human intuition onto what we're trying to do, and we should be willing to accept a certain amount of aesthetic unpleasantness as long as it's coherent. So I think the biggest challenge we have right now is we're deep in the pit of incoherence still. For people like that, we talked about that years ago, which is the point where there's two versions of Ember and neither of them are the official one. I think it's even worse with AI because AI is overrepresents the docs, the Stack Overflow things. And why shouldn't it believe the docs? We're not willing to recommend stuff, so now of course it believes the docs, etc. I think it's just really important for us to pretty soon for us to have a version of Ember that's like the Polaris good parts, that is coherent, that tells the whole story, and that we could start presenting to AIs as the version of Ember that it should be using. Again, there's a whole migration story. That's a whole other thing. But I think if we want to get to a point where the whole story I just told about empowerment being about encoding expertise from experts into something we can all use together because we share intuition, and the way that AIs are a really good fit for that story. If we want that to work, we really do need there to be a thing that Ember is that fits that. And I think right now we have two things, and the one that the AIs believe is the one that's from 2015 or 2018 or whatever. So I think that is the highest priority. And I think what I would ask for people is like, swallow a little bit of aesthetic displeasure if it's not cutting into that, if it doesn't cut into that story. I think as long as we have a single coherent story and it's possible to get the right answer, like take the huge thing in your brain, follow the docs, get the right answer. I think we should just like really push on that and close the gaps of and basically get to a point where we're happy with Polaris, basically, and we should do that as quickly as possible. That's my battle cry, and I do believe that there is a chance right now for the AI era to shake things up significantly in the way that I just described, and I think we either take it now or we don't take it now. But if we take it, I think there's a good chance, because I don't think the world wants the thing that I don't think the world wants AIs to be generating React code, honestly. And that's hopefully nobody clips that and puts on Twitter or whatever. But I think the world actually wants what we're offering here, but we need to actually deliver it and not have it be a thing that exists in people's minds. We need it to exist in the real world. But thank you.
Thank you.
And you can feel like, if I'm on Discord, DM me if you have questions, etc. Happy to talk anything.